Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before we begin, I want to start off with a quick admin note and introduce Jane. She has the scanner. So this course is going to be a full 60 minutes, and it's been approved for any type of CPE, CEU, CompTIA credit. So please, at the conclusion of the briefing, see Jane and make sure you scan to get your appropriate credits. Good morning. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Tom Monahan, Product Manager for PM Cyber Resiliency and Training, and the moderator for today's professional panel, Partnering to Build the Persistent Cyber Training Environment for Cyber Mission Forces. PCTE is one of my programs. Currently, cyber mission forces face a readiness challenge pertaining to training, time, throughput, efficiency, and quality of systems available. Program offices chartered to rapidly deliver capability to offset my previously stated readiness challenges are constrained with ill-defined requirements, poor contract vehicles, and continued government bureaucracy, all while trying to keep pace with ever-evolving technology. A successful strategy must make use of industry best practices, have the right culture, compete for best of breed, and collaborate with key stakeholders. The current PCTE system will not be your typical government acquisition program. It must be streamlined, it must be rapid, and it must be agile. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to be joined by a panel comprised of senior and experienced officers and executives from Army Cyber Operations, Department of Defense Acquisition, and industry partners. Would the panel members please take a moment to introduce themselves?
Good morning. My name is Michael Bynan. I'm from SimSpace Corporation. I lead the development effort for the SimSpace Cyber Range, and we're part of the PCTE consortium of vendors that you're going to hear from today.
Good morning. I'm Rich Haggerty, Project Manager for ITS, Instrumentation, Targets, Threat Simulators, and Soft Training Systems. Tom is one of my PMs, and PCTE is one of my programs. And I'm wondering why I got stuck next to the PhD.
Good morning, I'm Brett Bearclough. I just finished a 30-year career in the Army and transitioned to Mantech Corporation. Right now I'm responsible for Army and Joint Cyber and Information Solutions.
Good morning, my name is Kevin Hofstra. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Matova. I oversee the development of our cyber range product along with the services that we do for cyber operations.
Good morning, I'm Keenan Skelly from Circadence, former Army EOD tech turned cyber nerd. I love every minute of it. I'm a VP at Circadence where I help organize the PCTE program internally.
Good morning, my name is Steve Rain. I'm the TradeOut Capability Manager for Cyber. Within my portfolio I have offensive cyber, defensive cyber, cyber situational understanding, and PCTE. I'm the user representative and generate the requirements for PCTE.
Thank you, panel members. So the way this is going to work is I will start off with a couple of directed questions and leave about 25 to 30 minutes at the end for questions from the audience. There will also be mics that will get over to you so you can ask the appropriate question, everybody can hear you. So to start off, the 1998 movie Pentagon Wars, with some sarcasm, tells the story of how the U.S. Army generated the requirements for and then built the Bradley fighting vehicle. In the movie, the program itself had its fair share of challenges due to ill-defined requirements and ever-evolving requests. To the TICM, how does the government adequately define its requirements in a cyber environment that changes so rapidly?
Yeah, so thanks, Tom. So a cyber environment is extremely challenging. So I'll start with that. What we face with is a constant technology change. New technologies are coming out about every 18 months or so. For the most part, being able to predict what technologies are going to be important more than 24 months is somewhat of a challenge. In addition to that, the threat space is always constantly changing as well. Low barriers to entry, adversaries, even our advanced adversaries, are constantly changing their techniques, their capabilities, so maintaining pace with that. The third aspect is our operations itself. We continue to mature our operations in cyberspace as well. So those three things are a constant change. It becomes extremely challenging to understand how to adapt our forces in general for cyberspace. What we're constantly doing, though, is that partnership between the operators with the capability developer, which is the TICMs, and the material developer, the program managers, that constantly have interactive discussions and exchanges is what's critical. For PCTE, what we formed is we formed a community of interest The community of interest includes Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, as well as Cyber Command, and we look at, as well as, I'll call it our range partners. Partners from the National Cyber Range Complex, Cybersecurity Range, those folks who will contribute resources that potentially will go into PCT and who have done training before, understanding and communicating with those. In addition, talking with our industry partners, understanding where they're moving forward with the technology starts to inform where we're going to go with our requirements. The requirement model we're using for PCTE is a prototyping, so identify quick things we can do. We know there's a base level set of requirements to be able to generate a operational environment to train in, and how do we figure out what to do a much larger aspect of that is where we get with the industry partners and our users to maintain that constant vigilance and discussion.
Thank you, sir. Industry leaders such as Ford Motor Company successfully operate as large-scale system integrators on multiple platforms, incorporating hardware and software into well-defined and operational systems of systems. To the PM, the government doesn't have the best reputation filling the role as a lead system integrator on large-scale acquisition programs. What factors influenced your decision to act as a lead system integrator for PCTE, sir?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So this is a very unique acquisition program without going through the entire history of it. But money came before a defined requirement, came before a real understanding of what PCTE was supposed to be. So I would say what drove the decision for the government to act as the lead systems integrator really was just the fact that we didn't have a contract, we didn't have a well-defined requirement. I didn't know that I could hand that role off to anybody and give them any kind of coherent guidance or structure to try to do the integration. So as Steve mentioned, in the prototyping phase, we are taking on that role to corral industry. And just to briefly talk about what Tom hit in the beginning, I mean, this really is a very unique situation. I mean, we went out to industry and asked them, after a series of competitions, to basically threw them all in one room and told them to work together. You know, different architectures, different intellectual property, a lot of challenges with that. So with everything this program has been through and being so in its infancy and in the prototyping phase, I don't think the government really had any choice but to be the lead systems integrator at first to get through the prototyping phase. Eventually, we will hand that off to someone much more capable than the government to do it long term, though.
Thank you, sir. Companies that operate in a global market often enter into joint ventures in order to gain a competitive edge. To all the industry members on the panel, how do you balance open collaboration with other industry partners while still protecting your intellectual property?
Yep, go ahead. Okay, yeah, I'll start with that question. I mean, at a high level, each of the companies has to decide, right, are you willing to be part of this or not, right? By default, everything we're doing is exposing our IP to our competitors, but also to the government and also to the eventual customers, the users of PCTE. So you just have to decide once and for all, is it worth your time and effort to put yourself out there to be able to do this? So in the case of SimSpace, we decided yes, it is. So then the second part of the answer is, well, so what do you do to be able to sort of balance that risk? So the government does have an approach. I mean, there's some technical details to it, but basically we're taking our existing products, wrapping them, and putting sort of an interface layer on it that we can talk open PCTE standards with the other components. So there is some effort there to be able to make that happen, but that approach allows us to be able to keep our product internally proprietary, but on the edges of it, talking with the other vendor products to make a cohesive product in the end. So I think that's the primary strategy that we use for dealing with that risk.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and continue with that. As Mantech looked at this problem, as we came forward, we really thought that an integration framework that allowed us to prevent vendor lock-in early in this process for PCTE and encourage collaboration was going to be critical. So for us, what we do is all our development, we provide government purpose rights. It's our development goes to the government, and as we're just discussing, by doing that and having that integration framework, that really helps protect the intellectual property of all the different vendors when they come in. So with an integration framework, a system of API gateways, I think we can prevent lock-in, have plug-and-play type capabilities where we can improve on content and capabilities as we move through this prototype process, and do it without the cost and added delays of one-to-one integration. And that's the way we're moving forward now, and we're looking forward to that.
So I'm a technical guy, so you'll get a bit of a technical answer here, so bear with me on this. But I think what you see within our industry is that there is already a movement from what would be a large-scale, turnkey, monolithic architecture. And each of us internally as product providers, we're already in the process of chopping that up into microservices. We're doing that so that we can be more agile in our development, that we can get product to market faster, and we can resolve issues faster than we would if we had a single turnkey solution that had components that were all interrelated with each other. So as we put this product together, they have asked us to take, okay, the government has decided they would like a technology from this vendor. We are able to take those microservices or those individual components, bring them out of our product, develop a method, application programming interface that will allow them to have web communications between those components, and do it in a way that the secret sauce that we have for how that technology works does not have to be exposed, but there is a set of defined inputs and outputs that come from each of those components that the vendors can agree upon and the government can mediate to ensure that we're all operating in the same way. I think we're also doing that ourselves within industry as we move to a more standards-based approach. Of course, we'd like our products to be interoperable with other vendors that are out in the marketplace. So as we look at how we define the specifications for each of the individual services in our product, we already have a standard that we can adhere to. And for us, as we come together on this project, we just make sure that we all coalesce onto that one single standard. So if you would have told me a couple weeks ago that you're going to put us 4 separate vendors in a single room with competitive products and say, okay, let's all get together and come up with some great ideas, I would have told you, hey, that's never going to work. But now that we've been there for a while, we have disconnected some of those components and mashed them together. I can tell you that, that we are creating those standards, that there is interoperability between those components. And I think we found that there's a lot of space for us to work together and to bring in a great product.
So, Kevin, you stole my microservices thunder there for a second, but I'm going to expound on that a little bit towards what you were saying at the end. You know, we did all come into this with proprietary IP rights and very specific data, but the great thing about what every vendor on this stage is doing is it's not apples and oranges, right? We're working with apples and apples. So it makes it a little bit easier for us to come together on those microservices that we can work together on and can build this PCTE product with. But at the end of the day, the collaboration that we're getting out of this as a company, that Matova is getting out of this, that SimSpace is getting out of this, is only helping all of our products be better. So while we've been able to separate that IP that's not going to be, you know, giving away all of our secrets, we've also been able to innovate with each other, which I think is kind of the point of this process.
Hey, Tom, let me make a comment, because I think what's important is that what you're seeing from industry and the partners up on the table is ability to work together in trade space. But one of the things from a requirement standpoint is we're not telling them how to suck the egg. And so what I mean by that is we're not giving them detailed technical specs. We're giving them capability statements. I need to be able to do X, Y, and Z. Those high-level capability statements on what the output and outcome should be is allowing that detailed exchange to happen between the industry partners to come up to what the right solution is. That also talks back to the technology aspect and in adding stuff on. As long as I can achieve that capability outcome, it gives the trade space in the engineering to happen where it should happen, which is over with the vendors over.
Colonel Haggerty, would you like to comment as well?
I think the vendors really hit it, but I just want to say one thing is that, and it might be a follow-up question, but we the government really did anticipate some challenges in this, going through a Shark Tank-like process, narrowing it down to 4 and then throwing them all in a room to work together. But I do have to credit them a lot for being very collaborative and very patient. The government isn't the best at streamlined, agile acquisition or development. So again, I think they've all worked very well together, and I'm real anxious to put out the next capability drop with it.
Thank you, sir. As a follow-up to the collaboration for all the industry panel members, as the product manager for PMCRT, I'm constantly seeking out ways to improve my program office and provide capability as rapidly as possible. What can the government do better in streamlining and managing cyber projects with similar acquisition strategies?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll start with that one. I think one of the biggest things that we've seen in this process so far is because we are using an agile process, and as we talked about earlier, it's not necessarily based on specific technical requirements, but it's based on capabilities, is that sometimes the capability doesn't always meet the expectation of the user. So as we go through this process a little bit more, making sure the users are very involved and helping develop those requirements, I think is going to be crucial to our success.
So I think the point of feedback that I would give is that as we determine the lanes in the road, as we decouple components of a system into bite-sized chunks, we need to have a clear understanding of what the government wants as those inputs and then as those outputs, because those are how we as vendors interoperate with each other. As long as we know what needs to be the format by which we need to exchange that information, we're able to manipulate that data in the way that it needs to occur. And I think the other component associated with that, within this space, there are standards, but believe me, there's a lot of standards. So there's many different ways of doing things. And in some cases, there's a technical interoperability standard where there may be 3, there may be 4 that are proposed by different industry groups. And so to have government come in to be able to make a decision, okay, you're on this industry standard, they're on that one. This is what really ultimately as a program will work best for us, and then have both of the vendors cut over to that, I think allows us to move a bit faster.
Yeah, I'd just like to expand on the flexibility discussion. One of the things we've really enjoyed in this process is that we're attracting innovative people with high quality that really want to work on this program. This is good work. And as a result, their innovation is taking us sometimes into levels on some of our products beyond what we really thought we were going to do as we were working the proposals and the demos over a year ago. And what the PM's done by using this process, it's really allowed us to provide more capability more quickly through the flexibility and the deliverables that you don't normally see in a firm fixed price type of contract. We like that because really not one person or company has all the answers to our very complex problems here. And I'll quote General Hernandez from our cyber. He said, "We don't know what all the skills required are yet." So we're learning. I think as we learn from the soldiers that are touching material, as we go through and training on these systems, that's going to help us provide a better product. That flexibility that we're getting through the open microservices enterprise framework that everyone discussed is extremely important, and that's really going to allow us to go faster through the agile process, and we like the fact that the PMs embrace that process.
And the part that I'll add to it is, it's clear that bringing vendors together and having the technology pieces that the other panelists talked about is critically important. You have to have all that. But the one part that PCTE on the government side has that is critically important is they have a set of people that are acting, for those that are familiar with the agile process, they have a product owner. They have the person you can go to that knows, that understands the vision, represents the users, and can clearly articulate to all the vendors almost every day when it comes up exactly how the pieces should work. That I would say by far is the most critical piece that the PCT has put in place, and I think it's really showing dividends.
Thank you. The Chief of Staff of the Army created the cross-functional teams to share critical information with similar Army priorities. Kevin mentioned well-defined inputs and outputs, and Dr. Bennett mentioned the agile process. To the TICM, what lessons learned have you applied to PCTE from other cyber requirement efforts?
Yeah, so that agile process, I'll start off with the first thing is breaking down the process in the Pentagon in general. So generally in normal acquisition, it's a very linear process where you have requirements, you eventually get down to getting those approved, funding, and eventually you get down to a product in the end. That takes too long. What we've been successful doing in both just in cyber in general is breaking those processes down. Getting to the point where, first off, the delegation of authority of approval for requirements has gone from the Pentagon down into my boss, General Morrison. So it's elevated down at a 2-star level. So that's pretty significant to be able to get into requirement approval to then pass off for a PM to execute. The second area is, instead of a linear process, starting to get to the parallel process. For example, I'll use testers. Having testers in at the end of the process normally ends up with a challenge, and you usually end up increasing your cost and schedule because the tests don't necessarily work out. We've pulled the testers up front in the requirements definition. So as we're writing capability requirements, I'm asking the testers to go about to make sure that the way I'm writing my requirement statements, is it testable, is it measurable, am I going to incur an increased amount of cost or increase amount of time to get to something that I don't necessarily really need, or is there a better way to state that? So moving the process and having more parallelism, so having those integrated product teams, we talk about it a lot, but we don't necessarily do that. We're actually trying to materialize that integrated product team on a daily basis, where we have those folks, the users are down. I'm not sure how many times Rich is probably kind of running out of money because we're pulling the users down constantly down in Orlando, but we need that. We need to make sure that the users are well involved inside of what's happening on the development side. Plus, I've got my team out parsing around with the community writ large to make sure we understand what's happening out in the community. That interactive involvement with the user is absolutely critical. And the other factor is what's happening today. It may change the way we're training tomorrow. The area is new, it's maturing. As we look at how the concepts are for training, each services has a slightly different model. They're looking at how they do collective training. So we're taking those things into account, being able to take those and then inject it into capability drops as we move forward. The other aspect is what do we learn from the other side of the house? I would actually probably argue that within the PCTE realm is one of the areas that we're actually learning from, because the model that we're using is probably out in front of where the rest of the services are and the rest of the Army is, and we're learning models that we're doing from this development and applying those across other developments.
Colonel Haggerty, the TICM just talked about some of the current challenges and efficiencies in using the agile acquisition methodology. You care to comment on how well it's worked so far?
Yeah, so I would tell you, again, from a technical perspective, we have adopted that agile model. Like, sent a bunch of people to school, brought in some technical experts. We're relying heavily on industry, but from a programmatic perspective, not to get all teary-eyed and philosophical, but we really are trying to break new ground. We always talk about rapid acquisition, but we typically don't have the processes or the stomach to actually do it. I would say with PCTE, it is somewhat disconcerting to have a large-scale, high-interest, highly visible program where you're briefing Congress about every month and have the courage to not have a well-defined roadmap moving forward. I mean, we truthfully do not have a defined blueprint of what PCTE is. So I would say, although it's a little bit disconcerting, I really credit Steve Rain and some of the other team members. We really have kind of formed that cross-functional team that the Army's trying to move to with some of its priorities. I would say we're already doing it. Steve and I and a few other select people from the stakeholders, I mean, we talk almost daily, we work almost daily together, and really it is a team effort. I mean, truthfully, it is a no-fear effort to keep moving forward, although the path isn't completely defined. And then along the way, take all the shots and the second guessing and the Monday morning quarterbacking along the way, mostly from the government. So it really does take a team, and I would just get on my soapbox for a second and say, if the government truly wants to embrace streamlined acquisition, if they want to do it like the SOCOM model, as you've heard, it's culture, it's not policy. And I think, although we've had some challenges, our team really has cracked the way to go about it. We're learning some hard lessons, but as far as the culture and the teamwork moving forward, I think we've got that down.
Hey, Tom, let me add a piece about the where Rich's comment about the definition of it. So what we've established is the vision of PCT, where we want it to go to, and established basically a left and right limit. But what we've acknowledged is the risk of we don't necessarily know where true end state is. Why? Because we're going to do a constant evolution. But what we have acknowledged is where that initial start point is, and based on the risk the department's willing to take of funding as well as time, continue to do constant improvements. And so that's what Rich was talking about, is that being able for leadership to acknowledge that that's the approach we're going to take and be willing to take that risk and move forward. There are going to be some things where we hit a dead end. It's just a fact of the way we're doing it, but we're going to fail fast, learn from it, incorporate it into the next spin.
Thank you, gentlemen. The Army recently established Army Futures Command to renovate the holistic acquisition process from the requirements to the system delivery. And both the PM and the TICM already kind of touched around the subject, but senior Army leaders have called for sweeping acquisition reform. What specifically has the PM office and the TICM done to streamline the PCTE program itself? Sir, I'll offer to you first.
So I think I kind of hit that. So I don't want to beat the proverbial dead horse. I mean, again, I think it's the culture in which we've attacked it. Assembling all the users, all the key stakeholders, the requirements, the users, all of those. Just making sure we have a team going forward so that there's complete transparency in everything that we're doing. The idea that we would disappear for a year and come out, with this unveiling of a product is technically, it is operationally, it is from an acquisition programmatically a failed effort if we try to do that. So again, truthfully, we have created that cross-functional team, and I think that's about the biggest thing that we've done to continue moving forward in the prototyping phase and to be successful. Very proud to say we delivered something within 12 months of receipt of funding. So, I mean, that sounds like a long time, but in acquisition ease and contracting and programmatics and all the other challenges, 12 months is actually a pretty short life cycle. And then we're on a azimuth to deliver incremental capability improvements every 6 months or less. So, again, I just credit the whole team in having the courage to move forward and having the right culture.
Yeah, I'll echo Rich. We've talked a lot about what we've done internally. I will talk a little bit about the external challenges. As you move to that model, one of the challenges we've seen is education of, I'll call it, the people within the process. So every day, I would argue I'm in constant knife fights with folks who are bound to the traditional acquisition model, educating what Congress has given us through authorization, the National Defense Authorization Acts on additional authorities for acquisition, change of requirements, and how the department is starting to shift. But it's a constant education with those folks that we have to deal with on a daily basis. Another challenge, it's a fact of life in the military. We had a significant leadership change over the summer. A significant leader change inside of the key leadership side of the house, from all throughout the department who are invested in PCT. So it's a re-education not only of the model that we're moving towards, but also what is PCT and where we are with PCT. That's a fact of life. We're not going to be able to get over it, but what it does do is it causes us at this table, Rich and I, as well as some others, to make sure we're constantly educating and forming leadership to understand where we are.
And if I may, so speaking on behalf of industry, just wanted to quickly point out again what Colonel Wren had mentioned, the government setting a vision and then establishing a left and a right bound, and then taking what they think are the best of the technologies within industry, combining them into a room and telling us the what, not the how, and allowing us to figure out amongst each other, okay, if you combine these technologies together, how will it work? And giving us the freedom to, as he mentioned, fail fast, find out what does work, find out what technical limitations may exist, and combine it in a way that we think gets us there the fastest without being told, oh, we're going to use that component that talks to that component. Well, when it comes down to the technology, it may work that way, so just establishing the bounds helps us to get it right.
Thank you. So every program or project, whether in the Department of Defense or industry, has its fair share of challenges. And both the TICM and the PM just discussed a couple of those challenges. I would ask the industry panel members, what has been the biggest challenge thus far in the development of PCTE?
I'll start with that. So as we heard, I mean, there's this nice vision to take components across vendors, put them in a room, you agree, magic happens, and then the product comes out. Well, the truth be told, there's a lot of things behind that magic. Even things as simple as saying, semantically, how do you describe a cyber range in one tool versus another? I mean, it's hard. There's differences. So when you do the wrapping and do this all agile, it actually costs time and schedule, and it's going to cost money to do that. But the difference is we're doing it slowly along the way. We're not just starting from a clean slate where you try to waterfall model the whole world and solve everything at once. So there are certainly challenges. The data models are certainly different, which means that simple wrapping we talked about earlier involves state and not insignificant transformations in the call and the data. So there's a bunch of technical details to work to get right. But I think we can do it because of the vendors that you see here up on the stage, that they are willing to do that and put themselves out there enough with their IP and how their systems work to make it work together. But it isn't easy. So I think that's the biggest challenge.
I'd like to jump in on the next one there. So I think one of the things that's really great about all the companies up here is that each of us have spent a lot of time developing the products that we've developed. We've spent 8 to 10 years, some of us 2 to 3 years on different products, and taking all of our product lines and making them integrate with each other. And that's a hard thing to do when you work just inside your own company. So when you take 4 or 5 companies that have spent all of that time and energy making everything look and feel perfect for the user, and then you put them all in one environment and ask them to kind of pull all of those things apart and create something new, that's a long process, and it's a time process, and it's a scheduling process, and it's an understanding the cost process. And those are some of the challenges we're seeing, right away, is how do we take all of these great products that we have and pull apart the best possible pieces of them and put them together into something new. And I think that's going to be a challenge as we go forward, is really determining the true time and cost requirement to make that happen.
Keenan, I think I just want to follow up on what you said, because I think a lot of people look at challenges as a bad thing. And in this case, I think the challenges we face are making us stronger, and it's actually a good thing. First off, the one challenge is when you really want to get going on a project, a long wait, and then followed by periods of intense activity. That's always kind of challenging to have everyone kind of ready, and then finally get to go. It's a very combat-like DevOps process. It's movement to contact as we go from sprint to sprint right now. But that's a good thing, because we're learning and we're adjusting, and we've got the people on the team that can think through problems, find solutions, and move forward. And you don't get that in waterfall acquisition, and that's the power of where we're going right now. But then some of the challenges we had with the long start was we were able to do some pre-award risk mitigation activities. No one was stopped. No one on this panel, the company didn't do anything. Everyone, it was almost a year ago now that we did the demonstrations, I think, about this week. Did people stop? No, we kept on developing, we kept on learning, and we kept on expanding our product lines for some of the vendors, or our ability to integrate for those that are focused on integration. Also, what we've seen is that I think what we've been doing here, what Colonel Wren and Colonel Haggerty talked about, the Agile process, is now part of law. So we're seeing programs from NDAA 2018 and Section 874 that are now pilot programs mandated to use the Agile process by SecDef. And PEO EIS has some pilots, and I would expect eventually we're going to get sucked into some of those pilots. But for us, we're ahead of the game, and it's not going to be a problem, because we're already working toward that state of development and that process.
And I'll kind of close with it. We've experienced the same thing. I think part of the biggest challenge is we've just spent 10 years trying to create a highly integrated product, and then we've been asked to disassemble it. And so it's not easy to do, along with getting new types of inputs and outputs. So reworking all of the components in a way that we can continue our dev cycle, because keep in mind that all of the vendors up here continue to have their standalone turnkey integrated cyber product. And so essentially we have forked code bases, and we're trying to figure out internally, how do we get at producing a product that works well with other vendors, but also keeping all the hooks in place that our product, when it stands alone, remains the highly integrated look and feel that you have within that. So I think a lot of that is what we're dealing with on the dev side.
Thank you. So I'd like to break from the questions now and move to the audience. If you have any specific questions you want to direct towards a panel member, please stand up. We'll get a mic over to you, and you can direct it specifically to a panel member or just generally to the panel. So if there are any questions. So we have a mic coming up front here.
PM, it's alum.
Hey, yeah, I am an alum, so good work, and appreciate what you guys are doing. I'm Dave Lockhart from the Boeing company, and like several other companies, I think that we've been following PCTE, trying to understand what it's going to evolve into, what it's going to become, understand that it's a fast-moving train. Now, the question that I have with respect to the process and the transparency, and maybe there's some things that some members of the team have read that I haven't seen yet as it relates to many of the things that you're talking about, the vision, the strategy, the things that you've mentioned today, how they relate to future efforts on this same program, how they relate to a greater inclusion of others beyond the 4 organizations on the stage, right? So if you are evolving requirements now, if you are developing an architecture of sorts now, how do you harness the energy of the rest of industry at the same time? If we're spending IRAD dollars now, we want to make sure that we understand the same things that those that are currently working the program understand, so that we don't start going off in one direction and then have to suddenly turn around and reverse something when we do get exposed to additional information. So maybe it's just something I don't know yet and that it's out there somewhere.
I think I can take that, Dave. So, so our strategy has been through competition and using other transactional authority. The 4 members on the stage and some of their subs did competitively win the chance to be on the stage. I guess if that's a good thing or a bad thing, they may flip-flop any given day. But the overall acquisition strategy or vision is in this prototyping phase, as we finalize the requirement and we continually put capability out, industry will have an opportunity writ large to compete for kind of this whole enchilada. So the I call it the objective contract. Liz is another name for it. I forget what the acronym is now, but there is an objective contract that's going to award in about mid-2020 that will take this prototype and everything that the government has and I call weaponize it. So they will stabilize it, documentation, sustainment, they will inherit the lead systems integrator responsibility. They will basically take it at whatever version it's at, 4.0, 5.0. They will take that and again be that single integrator moving forward and then continue to build upon PCTE. But oh yeah, there you are. Right. But again, the vision is not to our biggest fear with this critical capability gap was to sit idle while we spent 2 years in the contracting process and prototyping, doing the fail fast. I'll just say I thought was a good methodology not only to get capability out and support joint readiness, but also again allow us to be active while we're putting that large contract in place.
I agree with all of that. The only piece that's still not there for me really is the information and the things that you're learning now, the information that you're generating in process. How does that information and those lessons learned get to people that are building capability now, preparing for the competition, so that they don't come to the competition and say, oh, this is what I have to do, as opposed to, so in other words, how do you create a repository of information that qualified vendors have ready access to as they are developing and/or refining and/or adapting capabilities?
Yeah, so one, you're off my Christmas card list, Dave. We're not meeting anymore. But no, but I would say, not to be flippant, but I would tell you, I truly can't define exactly what PCTE 2.0 is going to look like in January. So, again, the idea that I could hand industry, either a codified written document or a stable vision to influence IRAD in a year, 2 years, 3 years, I'll be honest, I really can't do that. I mean, we truly are in an agile environment where we are trying to focus only on capability, not just contracts and not just single vendors. So I understand where you're coming from, but I guess my answer is I don't know that I can give that to you. I mean, through a series of industry days, Pulse, I've done 775 one-on-ones this year, I think. So, I mean, we try to be as transparent and communicative as we can, but as far as a blueprint of what it's going to be, I really don't know. I don't know what it's going to be in 2 years when we let that contract, but we will do our best to continue to share and broadcast and be transparent so that industry has a good feel for about where we're at and where our capability gaps are moving forward. I mean, PCTE has a lot of different aspects of it. Automated Op 4. I mean, there's a lot of automation that we're asking for get pumped in that just doesn't exist today. So I guess I'll take the task to try to kind of run a cut sheet of gaps that we're still fighting and things that we think we've already addressed or we think we've adequately addressed for now.
Hey Dave, let me take a shot, because I think where you're really getting at is competitive market space, and I'm gonna use bad acquisition terminology, so shoot me when I get off the stage. But you've got folks up here right now who have kind of won that first challenge, if you will, and there's still competitors that want to get into, hey, how do I get into either the second or the third or fourth? And I have what I think is the best of breed, and I think that's what you're doing, is what you're asking for is how do you maintain competitiveness, realizing you didn't quite win the first or second challenge, but you still want to be competitive inside of a future side, and how do you maintain currency? I would say right now is that's a new model. I think it's a new model pretty much for the department as a whole. And as you see, I don't think we know the answer to that yet, to exactly how to solve that. But I believe that's something that we've got to figure out to do to maintain that open competition. And how do you maintain that cyclic standpoint so that there is the best of breed at the time of need? Because that's really what we're talking about.
Sir.
Thank you. Also, alumni John Maddox. So I have 3 questions, 2 for the PMs of the House, Rich and Tom, and 1 for requirements for Steve. I'll start with the easy one. From a GLSI perspective, are you going to look at putting the standards and backbone in place, for example, to pull the thread on Dave's question a little further? I would suggest publicly available APIs and SDKs. They be standardized. I know you have 4 great team members with you, but as you move forward, I was wondering if you're coming up with a plan such as that would be publicly available APIs for all the industry partners out there. So food to chew on. And a second question, I was in a briefing with Lieutenant General Ostrowski, and he mentioned a gift from the Hill, NDAA 19-804, Section 804, which gives the Army authority to do rapid fielding and rapid prototyping, 2 different things, to field within 5 years if you can get an LREP. Sounds like you're well on your way to getting there, and I was just wondering if that's in your plan to exploit that gift from the Hill without abusing it, and as he put it. And the third question is to Steve, our trade ocean partner here. You mentioned traveling back and forth with the training CFT positioned in Orlando as a center of excellence. Is there a move afoot from the cyber COE to pre-position your team down there to have day-to-day synchronization to ensure that integration is taking place when you move forward? So those are 3 questions. Don't need to answer them all or any of them, but just food for thought.
Good, sir. I'll let you go first.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir. I think I can answer this fairly quickly. On the 804, I think you're right. I think it was a gift. We were very fortunate with Mr. Kendall, Mr. McStravick, the Army acquisition executives when the Army was designated the lead. Through acquisition decision memorandums for PCTE specifically, I would say we don't need 804. We right now have the authorities that we need, and those authorities delegated down to the proper level where 804 doesn't do much for us on the PCTE side. Other programs, absolutely. To that question, I will say what has been the gift that I guess was always there, but probably we didn't exercise enough was using other transactional authorities. So again, those competitions were integral in helping us in the prototyping. To the other question, yes, and I think that's an excellent answer to try to address Dave's issue. Not pointing the finger at the cyber community writ large, but while we were under an extended continuing resolution, it did give us time to survey the landscape, and there really isn't a common interface or standards right now across the communities. I mean, well, not completely. The ranges, some of the communities, the services, Cybercom, they all have sometimes common tools, sometimes interoperable standards, but there isn't one. I think the one thing that just by basis of having the funding and the momentum, one thing PCTE will do is set those standards. What PCTE is built to will largely become the standard. And I don't say that arrogantly, like, we're going to set it and everybody else has to follow us. We're trying to be as open and interoperable with the existing stakeholders, but for all the ones that aren't going to meet, I'll call it that majority, everyone else is just going to have to get in line. So I think it will force the idea that it will have a common set of standards, or more importantly, a common interface. And yes, sir, that will be defined. Does that make sense? I answer your question, sir? And yes, sir, and publicly available. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, I'll take the standards part. Just to kind of reinforce what Rich's point is one of the mandates that we were given by Congress was to use existing DoD resources to the maximum extent possible. What that really means is that use the ranges that are already out there. And right now, those ranges, if you look across what's the cyber range landscape, whether it's for testing or training, depending on what time of day and what qualifies, it's similar to what's a data center versus what's not a data center. But there's over 50 of those. And some of those are DoD, some of those are in the government, and some of those are in academia and industry as well that we leverage as we build out cyber events. Most of those have been built separately and independently. So that's a challenge in and of itself, is not just in PCTE, and that's where Rich was going, is that by defining what the PCT standards are, is going to force a lot of those other ranges to move towards a common standard. So PCT almost is a forcing function to make that occur. There's been a lot of talk about those ranges moving to a common standard, but there hasn't really been a forcing function. Reference your comment about moving down to Orlando. Major Josh Thomas would probably tell you he's got his Disney passes probably more than what he needs. But as the user representative, I have a small bench team is the reality, and I can't spend all my time with Rich. So we got to spend time with the Air Force, the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Army, as well as Cyber Command. So he's a traveling road warrior to get that. But I will tell you that he is in constant communication with Rich's team, probably more than 2-3 times a day.
So. All right, so if there are no other questions, I'd like to offer kind of a free play up to the panel. Does any panel member have any closing comments they wish to give?
Yeah, just in closing, the PCTE itself is an absolutely critical capability for the department. And just to kind of understand what's starting to drive where it's at right now is, if you think about cyber operations, we are in cyber operations 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It is a domain we are in constant engagement. The soldiers, sailors, airmen, Coast Guardsmen that are operating that domain need a place where they can train. Okay, we've got places we can train for conventional forces. From a cyber aspect, we don't have an area where we can really get to and do that training. Everything from individual training all the way up to full-blown mission rehearsal. And that's where this capability is absolutely critical. Although the focus right now is getting from the collective training up to the mission rehearsal aspect. That's primarily because that is the harder area. The individual training right now, I would surmise that each of these individual companies up here have that down pretty well pat. And it's just which flavor do you want? It's the hard part, which is that collective training and getting all the way up to mission rehearsal. Looking forward to in the future, I think where we are right now, we're on this cusp. It's been a little bit long trying to get to where we are right now today. But I think within the next 18 months, you're going to see a rapid capability of actual, we're no longer talking about what it is in the future. You're going to be talking about how it's performed and what is it actually doing.
Okay, so I will just say, everyone on the panel has been very complimentary today, but I would tell you this has just been very hard in a lot of aspects on everybody involved and a lot of the stakeholders not on the stage. So I guess in closing, I really do. I want to thank the panel members for not just supporting today, but also just in their general support and patience on a day-to-day basis. Because again, not kind as Steve mentioned, we have left and right limits. We sort of know where we're going, but during this prototyping phase, during this requirements refinement phase, it is very much, I think, what did Brett say, a combat operations environment. So it has been very challenging. So again, I just want to thank publicly our partners and everyone who's been very supportive of the program. And again, I'd give you guys a chance for your parting comments as well.
So I guess in parting, SimSpace is very happy to be a part of this effort. We think it's really important. We plan to be in it for the long haul and bring all the lessons learned we've had independently, having separate products, bringing everything we have to bear to make PCTE successful. And we're, like I said, we're happy to be part of it.
I'd just like to add that a long time ago, a wise professor told me that as a teacher, if you want your students to work hard, you as a teacher have to work even harder. And I think we're starting to feel that. If we want to provide good training for soldiers in a very contested domain, a very important domain, it's requiring the partnership between government and industry to work even harder than we expect our soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen to work. We feel that, but at the same time, we're very excited about putting out capability that's going to change the way we work in this domain. And that has made it worth the extra effort. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say that we're excited to be a part of the effort. We're working as hard as we can to bring the capabilities to the warfighter as soon as possible.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it is all about the warfighter. And when we go around to CPT units and seeing folks who don't have anything to do right now, they don't have anything to train on, they don't have any way to move forward, for us, that's really the best motivating factor is how do we get something out to them that they can use today? How do we get something out there? Because we're getting attacked as a country regularly, and we need to be prepared for that. So we're happy to be here and be a part of that process to really help the warfighter.
So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the panel members today for participating. I appreciate it. Thank the audience for attending today's panel and some of the questions. Again, the admin note, please, if you need your 1 hour credit, see Jane with the scanner directly to my right. And that concludes our panel. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I can't find my way back to you until you make amends with the demons you've been through. I can't regret leaving you alone until you find your way back home. Find your way back home. Don't let me drown. Don't let me drown.